thanks again, Matthias, for organizing this event, for inviting me and also you, all of us. And it's my pleasure also to open this session on morals in markets, social responsibility, and so on. I slightly changed my title, but it's now social responsibility in markets. And this is a topic which is by far not new. So people were talking about social responsibility in markets for a long time, for decades. But it is something which, in particular, due to decentralized production and media attention all over the world, is in the attention of the media and consumers. And you see just a small collection of examples I collected when we had scandals in the recent time. Research on socially responsible behavior of consumers is also not new. So the marketing literature in particular has stressed this topic for some time, and a typical study in this case would be that you ask consumers whether they are willing to pay a markup for a socially responsibly produced good, and then people answer. And typically what they do is say, yes, of course, and we would be willing to pay more, and then you have the kind of puzzle that people say, we would be willing to pay a markup for social responsibility in markets, but on the other hand, the share is relatively low with respect to what people name in the questionnaires. And then people went into the field, and here are a couple of studies where people manipulated the supply, researchers manipulated the supply side in markets. They offered products which are labeled either ethically loaded, fair trade, ethically loaded, or others, and check the volatility and the prices in those markets they set up on eBay or other internet platforms. But all of this is only one side of the market, and what we have to do is look at the market as a whole. And I think this is also this session in this sense is very nicely, because I think this is what we all do in this session, to look at the market as a whole, to study the market interaction, and in particular the market design. How does the market design, looking at both market sides and their interaction, influence social responsibility? And by market design studies, particularly look at competitiveness of markets, information in the market, the degree of information on social responsibility, for example, also by labels, by certification. There are some papers around, a very nice paper by Björn, Roberto, and Zhao in QJE. Björn will not talk about this paper, but related stuff, so I will give it to him to say that this is a very nice paper. I can agree on this. And I will tell you what we did recently. So Mark Picos, who was a grad student of mine, and I started also some years ago to think about the problem and what to do. And one of the first paper we have is called Consumer Social Responsibility, and there we also look at how the market design can influence how social responsibility is in the market. And this is a pure lab experiment, and it has producers and consumers in the lab, and our proxy for social responsibility is the worker's wage of a worker who is also a subject in the lab, is employed by the producer, and the producer is kind of a dictator in dictating a wage for the worker. The worker has nothing to say in this. The worker just has to work for whatever wage he or she receives. And we have 10 different treatments in this design, and these treatments vary, first of all, in two dimensions. We have two dimensions, and the first dimension is competitiveness. We look at whether it is a monopoly market, so no competitive market, or a competitive market. So these are these two components. And then we have 5 components of information. what the consumer knows about the social responsibility, about the wage of the worker. And these vary from no information at all over there is full information. There might be labeled something like a certification that the producer can buy for his or her firm that he or she pays a minimum wage. There is the possibility in one treatment of consumers actively achieving information like searching the web for the working conditions of this firm. And the worker can kind of communicate their satisfaction to the general public. When we did the experiment, do not know whether you remember, there was kind of a scandal that somebody said in a cloth of Primark there was a little note knitted into this cloth, into this garment, and said, I have very poor working conditions, please help me. I think nobody by now knows whether this is true, but this is the kind of thing that workers can communicate wherever they are over the internet or organizations their working condition. The questions we have in this experiment is, first of all, do social responsible products exist and persist in those markets? And is it profitable for consumers to offer socially responsible products in the market? When there is no competition in the market, when it's a monopoly supplier, then the answer is a clear no. Independent, irrespective of whatever information we give the consumers, products, socially responsible products, and this means products with a decent wage for the worker, not with a wage of close to zero, do not exist and persist in the market. Whenever they do this, they reduce the profit of the supplier, and these products do not come to place. The monopoly is a very strict condition, because think of these sneakers that everybody in your class have, and you as a kid also need to have these sneakers, or this smartphone with everybody wants to have, and there is nothing like a substitute for it. Your parents might tell you these sneakers look alike and they are as good as the others, but whoever has a teenage kid or can think of teenage times, there are no substitutions, right? So the only thing in this case when there's a monopoly is to forgo consumption in order to enforce from the consumer side social responsibility, and this is what people don't do. But when there is competition of the suppliers, then there is a product differentiation. Some take the possibility to offer socially responsible produced goods and make a product differentiation, and what turns out in the market is that those producers receive significantly higher profit as long as the markup is not too high. So you can sell those products, but what is also clear in the market, consumers are willing to pay a markup, but it's not too high. Okay, so the conclusion more or less of this paper, and at this point we also argued with management science, because we were thinking, yeah, we have this conclusion, and in the end, I mean, this was at the time where people were discussing whether markets at all erode morals, but what we find, and what we also want to stress in this paper, is that with competition, there is a possibility for social responsibility in markets, and there is a positive effect of competition on social responsible behavior in markets. We moved on in this research and said, okay, these were allocative respects. This was about distribution. How much of the cake is going to the consumers? But there are other aspects of social responsibility and ethical consumerism, which is apart from pure money transfer. And this is, people are interested whether firms pay taxes, whether they obey animal laws, and so on. So there are a lot of different aspects of ethical consumerism. So what we did is We also did a competitive market with buyers and sellers, and what we have is we modeled within firm honesty. So what the producer of the good can do is the producer can be dishonest to his or her worker in order to save on the wage of this worker. So it was a model like there's a state of the world drawn, and this is only known to the producer, and then the consumer, and then the worker has to guess the state of the world. Whenever he guessed right, you have a low production cost, and whenever you tell your worker that he guessed right, you have to pay a high wage, and when the worker did not guess right, then it's a low production cost, and if you tell this worker, then you have low wage. But in particular, there are incentives to lie to the worker. You may say this high productive worker, sorry, you guessed wrong, thereby you can pay this low wage, and thereby you can offer a better price to the consumer. So it's also in the interest, in the monetary interest of the consumer, that the producer lies to his or her worker in order to save the production cost. And in this model, we separate honesty from the distributional concerns, and we also have different information conditions. And what we can see here is that a lot of consumers are strictly averse from buying from firms that made a good price because they were dishonest to their worker. These were highly productive workers, but they told them, sorry, you're not so productive, I only give you the low wage, and they lied to them. And here, the title is The Competitive Advantage of Honesty. We can see that honest firms have a competitive advantage, but the information is crucial only if honesty is fully transparent, if you can really see that this is an honest firm. Okay? Moving on to this, and knowing that transparency plays such a crucial role, this is now, which also gave the title to this talk, this is joint work with Lukas Wenner, who is sitting there and who is answering all the questions. And this is work in progress, so we are very happy also for questions. We moved on and said, well, this is a very nice, these are very nice results, but suppose we were to give recommendation for market designers, what would we say? And saying, well, you have to achieve full transparency about social responsibility in the markets is quite demanding. In reality, this might not be possible to achieve. There are political, technical, legal, whatever constraints on achieving full transparency. And the question we had then was, what if we go a step back and say, okay, producers can voluntarily disclose their product information. I do not know whether you can see it here. This is an ad from Apple, which says they have 100% renewable energy they use in their head office and in their plant, and are very aggressive in advocating this. And these are not the only ones. So you can see it with firms that they disclose parts of their social responsibility very offensively to the consumers. And what we do is, again, we have competitive markets, and our proxy for social responsibility is a donation to a charity, to UNICEF in this case. And we have 3 information conditions, the 2 benchmarks, full information about the donation, no information about the donation. And what interests us is this info choice treatment, where the producers can choose whether or not to reveal information on the donation to UNICEF they give, and higher donations increase your production costs. And if you think about the situation and think about the equilibrium analysis in such a situation, and think about the beliefs buyers should hold when they see the different offers, either disclosed or not disclosed. If buyers have rational beliefs, they should believe that undisclosed information, undisclosed products are those with 0 donations. And if this is true, then in equilibrium, we would have the same level as under full transparency. If you can identify like one-to-one the undisclosed offers as those with zeros, then it's very clear what happens. And then the voluntary disclosure should be as the first best of full information. And this is something we brought to the lab for sellers to buyers. We have this donations between 0 and 100. There's a concave cost function for these donations. And we have buyers that have a value of 100. And as I said, donations are transferred to UNICEF, and this is something our students care about. We've seen this, that about 70% of our students that participate in the experiment rate this charity very high. So this is something people care about. What do we find? These are our 3 treatments. The green one is full info, red one no info, and the orange one, info choice. And as you can see, these are the donations. There is not much happening in between. So what is happening is on the 2 boundaries at 0 and 100. In the middle, there's some noise, more or less. What you observe is about 1/3 of all donations in the treatment where you can hide the donations are already hidden. And what you also see, and this is in line with what the equilibrium would predict, almost all of the donations that are hidden, and the hidden ones are these light orange ones, almost all the hidden ones are zeros. You only see here some hidden 10s and here like 1 hidden 20. But almost all, 94% of the hidden ones are zeros and vice versa. Almost all the zeros are hidden. So this is what we also would expect. Zero donations are hidden, hidden donations are zero. So more or less the consumers can really see what happens in this market. What you also see, so this is what we expected, but what you also see, compared to the full info, there's a considerable increase in zero donations when you can hide your donations. So if it would all be the same, then we also would see that the green and this orange bar are the same, that it's just, but we see that this is not the case. You have considerably more zeros in the info choice than in the other treatment. And if you look at average donations overall, what you see is full info leads significantly higher donations than no info. This is also something we would expect. And this is also something you might have expected from the previous graph. If you have the possibility to hide donations, average donations are lower because we have these lower zeros, and since in the middle nothing is happening, the mirror to this to the more zeros are the lower 100s. Okay, so there's a shift towards more zeros and lower 100s if you compare the full info to the info choice. And the question is, why is it so? So why are the donations in this info choice treatment lower than in this full info treatment? And what we see, and this is really striking, is that the choice set matters. So this is an endogenous choice by the producers. We have 4 different producers. And it might be that you as a consumer face a situation when you have all your products open. All the donations are disclosed, okay? And then you are like in a situation with full info. There is no hidden donation endogenously occurring in the market. And then if this is true, when all donations are disclosed and positive, then there is no difference between this full info and info choice. But the difference comes when you have hidden donations. When at least one of the products has a hidden donation, and we know that this is most likely a zero, that it attracts a certain type of buyers. And these are the buyers, and we asked them to rate the charity on a 7-point scale. And buyers who rate this not highly, but with 3 to 7, these are the buyers who like to buy those hidden donations in the info choice treatment, okay? And our explanation for this is that this hidden donation creates something like a moral wiggle room for them. You say, okay, I buy something, it has a hidden donation. Well, I don't know what it really is, so maybe I believe this is something with a positive donation, right? It gives you kind of a wiggle room. And since these buyers that do not rate the donation highly buy those products, there is demand for those products. And this also reduces the competition on the open ones, and therefore on the open ones there's reduced competitions, and the buyers that like to buy the charity, these are the buyers who also like to buy the open products. In the end, because we always ask is it profitable, who pays for the social responsibility, and who profits, you can see market prices are not too much different, although donations are different. So all the differences in the donations, which we have seen in the full info, are more or less borne by the sellers. The sellers have to pay the donation, not the buyers, because the prices are more or less the same. Here you can see the prices. They are lowest in info choice, but in the others it's not different. So prices are highest in full info, and the seller profits are highest in no info. But what might be surprising is why the prices in no info are relatively high. And what we see is we have a fraction of about 30% of buyers who do not go for the cheapest product. And the question is why in the no info. And the question is, why don't they do it? Is it they don't understand it? Why do they go for this dominated products? And if we compare it to full info, we only in 7%, and this is a much more complex situation because you have donation and price. So here we see it rarely, so we'd say it's not really a mistake, okay? But what these buyers seem to go ahead for is that they more or less believe that a hidden donation in this no info also comes with, that a hidden product comes with a higher donation, which is in some sense true. And these are in particular those who highly rate the charity. They want to do something for the charity, and they buy this higher product. This reduces competition, and this also drives that this red line doesn't have a decreasing trend like the others. So it reduces the competition, and it leads to this higher prices and profits in no info. To sum up, if we look at these features of market design, what we have seen is, first of all, market design influences the way social responsible goods are traded in markets. Competition as well as information play a crucial role. We have this positive effect of competition on social responsible behavior, and we have this positive effect of honesty as in the first place, non-monetary as a competitive advantage. And when we look at voluntary disclosure, we find that whenever you cannot guarantee or implement full transparency, voluntary disclosure yields more than no info at all. Of course, it leads less than the full info, but if you recall the distance of the two graphs, it's not too bad. So voluntary disclosure might serve as a second best solution for these cases. This is the zero. Thank you very much.